What's shaking, my friends? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Shay, and today I have my January wrap up for you. So I attempted to do this in a vlog style, and you will see that I epically failed at that. But I didn't read that much in the month of January. I read a total of 8 books, 3,562 pages, and a lot of this was due to the fact that I went on vacation twice in the month of January, so there were about 10 days in the month that I did not read anything at all, which was fine. I still had a good reading month. There was I don't think I had any 5 stars in the month of January, but you will see shortly exactly what I read. And so I just finished reading The Gods of Men by Barbara Kloss, which was a self-published fantasy, and I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. I ended up giving it 4 stars. So we'll talk about what this book is about. So this follows 2 main points of view. You have our character Sable, who when she was 9 years old, she was a flute player. She was a musician. She enjoyed that, and her dad asked her to play, and he is higher up in the government, and so there were government officials there, and she played, and unfortunately it was then she learned that she had magic, because what she played accidentally killed her sister, and then she has to be sent off to this place called the Wilds, where there are thieves and exiles, and they're hoping to hide her magic there so that she can still stay alive. However, some things go down and people find out who she is, and now they are starting to hunt her down, and there's magical beings and all that stuff as part of this world. The other character we're following is Jarek, and he is a prince of one of the worlds. There's different worlds in here. There's provinces and there's other kingdoms, and anyway, he is the prince of one of the kingdoms, and his father has been poisoned and he is dying, and he is told that there is a healer out there who has powers that can heal his father, so he is sent off to go find that healer. And so we're following his perspectives, and we're following Sable's perspectives, and then we are getting actual other side characters' perspectives, which I thought was really neat, but not enough to detract from the story, because lots of times when you have really a lot of multiple POVs, it can be a detractor, especially if you don't like one of those POVs. But the side characters are just really little short chapters, so it's not to take a lot of time in the novel in these side characters' heads, but in order to let you know what is going on when Sable or Jarek is not there. So with that being said, there were a couple of issues that I have with this book. I do think that this book is a great way to get into adult fantasy if you are looking for that, if you are coming off of YA fantasy, because for a little bit of this book I wondered, is this adult or is this YA? Because it read sort of like a YA, just with its plot and its pacing. It was very plot focused, so there was never a moment where we are meandering with nothing happening. It was everything was moving the plot forward, which is fantastic. But then we also had not much world building, which could be confusing. It confused me. I still am not 100% on the world. I loved the story. I love the magic. I'm not 100% on the different governments and the different world, and not even 100% of the magical beings and stuff that happened and how they happened, because there just wasn't that much time spent on that, which can be a detractor from a lot of things. I still enjoyed the story even though I didn't understand it fully, but that's why I did not get 5 stars, because of those negatives. However, another negative I could say, and I don't mean to keep saying negative, it's not this definitely is not a negative on the books, it's just a negative on me. So when we have a lot of fantasy characters, I like for them to be named different things. In fantasy, there's lots of characters, and I don't want to get them mixed up. So if we have a Jane and a Karen, those are 2 names that are very distinct, and I can understand who Jane is and I can understand who Karen is. But when you have names that are very similar, it detracts from the story, because in my mind I'm like, okay, well, which one is this? Okay. So in this book we have two characters. One is named Jarek and one is named Velik, and to me the icks just got me all confused. Like I said, if Silver, like Chad and Thad, yeah, those are different names, but they sound very similar and they end with the same like things. So I appreciate if people would have very distinct names. Like, I understand that Jarek and Velik is not very similar, but it's the ick part that gets me, and I kept getting them confused. So just a heads up for you fantasy writers out there, make your names very distinguishable. But overall, I did really enjoy this book. I thought the characters were great. I do plan to continue on. The second book is already out. The third book is coming out in March, so that's fantastic. It will be all there for me to read. And so I am looking forward to figuring out what I'm going to read next. And I don't know, but you will know next. So I originally said I was going to do this wrap-up blog style, and then my month exploded. So we did a lot of vacationing in the month of January, and so I didn't get to do my wrap-up like I wanted to, but I am here to continue on with it now. I want to stop and say for a second that there were 9 days of the month that I was not able to read this month, so I still felt like I did a good job. So after The Gods of Men, I read Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. This is one of those isolated closed doors mysteries. This book came out in January of 2022. It follows our main character whose boyfriend, she meets him and they move to Hawaii, and she really just wants to go sailing, and that's her whole life goal, is to go traveling and sailing. And he does own a sailing ship, but it is currently broken down, and she is working at a hotel, and then she gets fired from the hotel. So then they have to figure out what kind of money are they going to make to continue on their journeys. And they happen to meet two college students two college friends who hire them for an insane amount of money to take them sailing to this island. And so they fix their boat for them, and they take off to this deserted island that has like some mystery surrounding it, some history to it. And when they get to that island that is supposed to be deserted, they find this other couple already on the island. So then there are 6 of them, and then another boat pulls up to the island with just one person on it, and then there is some mystery involving what's going on. Some mysterious things start to happen. But basically, I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars. And normally I like that kind of locked door, closed mystery setting. But these characters were so annoying. So you have this timeline of what's happening in present day, and then all the characters are also telling their story from before, what happened before they came to the island. So every single person is like telling their before story and their present story, and it gets confusing with how it is, because some chapters, like, I couldn't discern, okay, where are we now? Are we in the present? And if we're back in the present, whose mind are we in? So it would have been better had the chapters labeled at least whose mind we were going to be in, but that was not the case. I had an arc of this. I gave it 2 stars. I have nothing else to say about it. It wasn't that thrilling to me. Would not recommend. The next book that I read, because I was co-hosting a buddy read of this, and this is going to be The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. And this follows a dystopian world that basically has been run over by this virus that makes us zombies, and they call them the Hungries in this book, and I thought that was so fantastic. So this follows our main character. It follows several characters, but Melanie is a little girl in the book, and she is a Hungry, but she is one of the ones that is a higher functioning Hungry, and she is kept in this prison-like building, and the government is doing some testing on her, and then some things happen, and it I can't spoil it. I don't want to spoil it for you guys. But it's very hard hitting because it makes you think of, you know, what's going on, how you would feel if something like this were going to happen in your own society in the United States today. What would happen if it's very thought-provoking. I really liked it. I liked the imagery in this book. I liked M.R. Carey's writing in this book. Overall, I gave it 4 stars. Highly enjoyed this one. Then I picked up another new January 2022 release, and that's going to be Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. And I really have enjoyed Rachel Lynn Solomon's other works. I read the X-Talk last year. I can't remember what I gave it, but it wasn't a 5-star read. And this one wasn't a 5-star read either, but I gave it 4 stars. This follows our main character. I can't remember names at this point because, you know, it's been forever since I've read it. But basically, our 2 main love interests are basically trying to get their bosses to fall back in love with each other. Their bosses were in love and then got divorced, and now it is hellacious to work with them. They make the work environment terrible. They are constantly fighting, bickering, carrying on, and they have this big grand plan to get them back together. And so that's how the book starts off. I thought it was really cute. I did like the characters. There were a couple of weird things about it. I did like the fact that this follows our the main male character in this book is plus sized, so I found that very refreshing because there are not that many books with plus sized male characters. And he was also a single dad, so I also like that aspect. So, but do recommend it. Gave it 4 stars. Then I finally picked up the next book in the Dresden Files series, and that's going to be Proven Guilty by Jen Butcher. And I can't say much about this because it's the 8th book in a series. But Harry did some great things again. I think I gave this one 4 stars. And I just really love James Marsters' audiobook version of this. And so it was great. And I'm going to continue on with this, clearly. I'm going to do it at some point. But yeah, I highly recommend this series if you're looking for a mystery series. I will say that you will hear some criticisms on this about the male gaze and in the book. And it actually bothered me more in this book because people say as it goes along that he stops with that, but it bothered me in this book because there is a character in here that's a teenager and he is thinking inappropriate thoughts about her, and I was not comfortable with that aspect of this book. So I will say that did stunt my enjoyment of it, but I still recommend the series. I think it's a fun time. But I will say that to me, I don't know the hype of this series. I think it's just a regular paranormal series. I don't think there's anything fantastic great about it, you know, over other paranormal series. But it is still a fun time, and I recommend you read them. Then, guys, I did it. I read This Beast, The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the conclusion to the series that started with The City of Brass. Firstly, this book is almost 800 pages. I do not think that it needed to be almost 800 pages. But y'all, I read the conclusion to this book while I was in the waiting room waiting for my car. My car was in the shop and I was in the waiting room waiting for my car to be done. And of course there's other people in the waiting room. I had my earphones in. I was, you know, listening to the book. And here I am in front of all these people, and there were tears. And I'm sure those people thought that I had lost my ever-loving mind. But y'all, even though this book had points where I thought it meandered, where I thought that, you know, the page count could have been cut down, I still gave this book 5 stars. I mean, I could not. There's not a single character in this book that I hate. I wanted to, there's multiple points of view in this book. It follows our 3 points of views, actually. It follows Nari, a character, Ali, and Dara. And it, you know, goes in Nari. Now the next chapter we're going to do Ali. Now the next chapter we're going to do Dara. And yeah, there was not a single moment where I was like, hey, I am bored with this chapter. No, I enjoyed everything the characters were going through, and I was like, oh yes, I can't wait to get back to this next chapter. But then I'd get to the other person's chapter and I'd be immersed in that person's chapter, and then so there was never a time where I wanted to be in somebody else's head. And like in a lot of multiple POV books, you're like, oh, I hate this point of view, let me get to the next. There was never none of that. I love these characters, I love this world, I love how it ended. I just love it. 5 stars. This is, I can confidently say now that this is my favorite fantasy series of all time. Then I read another new January release called How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. And my thoughts are mixed on this. I was really excited about it because I like grief, if you know me, if you've been on my channel for very long. I really have a kinship with those stories. I love them. However, I do not have a great relationship with short story collections. So this is technically a novel, but each chapter is a different story. So you can technically really call it a short story collection. And it follows a plague that has broken out. It's a virus, and it is telling the story as here is the first chapter is how this virus came to be, and then the second chapter maybe 1 year after the virus, and the third maybe 3 years after the virus, and the fourth, and so on and so on. Each chapter you get farther out from the first outbreak of the virus, and you're being told of it not in, none of the characters are the same. It's a different story as we move along to the book, and how this person dealt with the virus, and how there's another person and this is how they dealt with the virus. There are some similarities, some connections to the stories, like maybe, you know, 6 stories down we have a brother from 4 stories back, but it never, like, it connects it and you see what happened to that character from 5 stories back, but it still felt very much like short story collections, and how different people dealt with grief and how it affected individuals. And so it's done in my enjoyment, because while I do like grief, I also like to know my characters that are going through the grief. So it was hard to know your characters when you're only spending a short amount of time with them. And it was very hard to read, because when this virus first starts out, it only affects children, and so you are reading about these dying children, and so that was very hard to me. The whole story is heartbreaking for sure, and so be aware of that. This is very hard hitting. It's very, you know, especially in times like we are today, in COVID times, and really it was interesting to see, you know, how as the years go by, the world changed. The way the new normals of life changed, and that was interesting, very, very interesting to see. So overall, I gave How High We Go in the Dark about 3 stars, just because I didn't like the short story aspect of it. But I highly recommend it for somebody that does like short stories, that doesn't mind, you know, a plague virus kind of book in these times. The next book that I attempted to read was Wings of Ebony by J.L., which was one of the books that I wanted to read that I had meant to read in January 2021 when it came out, and I did not get to read. So I went back and looked and decided to choose this book to read. I ended up DNFing this book because I just didn't like the way in which it was told. The book follows our main character, I think her name is Bree, and her mother died a year ago, and she has a half-sister, and her dad, they don't share a dad. So Bree's dad comes and whisks her away to this magical world and lets her know that she's now magic, and it leaves her half-sister behind in the hands of Child Protective Services. And so Bree risks, you're not supposed to leave the magical world, and Bree risks that and leaves the magical world. My problem with this book was the way in which it was told. It started out a year into the future, where Bree was already in the magical world, and she was leaving illegally to go find her sister. And so because we're working in present day, and then you're finding out how she learned about magic and all of that through flashbacks, it was just really, the world building was not very well. It wasn't very fleshed out. The characters were not fleshed out. So it wasn't for me, but that's not to say that it may not be for you. But ultimately, I ended up BNFing that one at 25%. So then after that, I needed a book to read, and I chose to read Namesake by Adrienne Young. I read Fable in December and decided that it was a duology, so I would just thankfully finish up one of my series in the month of January. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I can't talk much about it because it is a sequel, but it follows our main character Fable, whose mother has died, and after her mother died, her father takes her and dumps her on this island where basically it's very, it's hard to survive on, and she thinks she's unloved, and she is bound and determined to get off this island and prove to her father that she is worth something. And I really enjoyed the first book. We had a great found family in the first book, and we continue that in the second book, and there's some twists and turns and reveals that I overall enjoyed, but I didn't enjoy it quite as much as that first one. I gave the first one 4 stars and this second one 3 stars. So that's it, my friends. Spoiler alert, I can tell you that I am reading a lot more in February because we are only 2 days into February and I have already read 3 books. I'm having an amazing February. Hope to share that with you guys soon, and hope you guys are doing well.